For the last year and a half, I've been gluttonously reading and watching everything 7 Deadly Sins. I've read Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, 18th century monk Evagrius of Pontus's 8 Evil Thoughts, St. Gregory's original 7 Deadly Sins coining, and the popularization of the concept with Dante's Divine Comedy, and several other books related to the mythos. All to bring you this 7-part series covering my thoughts, analysis, and opinions regarding the mythos, following each sin closely, dissecting its origins, causations, effect, and impact on pop culture and society as a whole. We start off our journey with the overindulgent sin of gluttony. We often see depictions of gluttons overeating to the point of their stomachs hiding their shoes from their gaze. However, gluttony is much more than just the overindulgence in food. This misconception has led many to believe that gluttony is a victimless sin. After all, who gets hurt by someone's second plate of barbecue? Gluttony is a sin that's intrinsic to the instinct of man. It's been both a blessing and a curse to our survival as a species. The chemistry of your brain is designed for your survival. We have positive feedback from our brains when we partake in actions that increase the likelihood of continuing ourselves and the species. For example, food is a need that would give positive chemical reactions in the brain, more so when we consume foods we enjoy or are high in sugars. Sex also gives a positive chemical reaction in our brain, as it is a means for prolongment of humanity. Animals of all kinds have this functionality in their brains. It's how as organisms we've evolved to survive. Simply satisfying our needs isn't an act of gluttony. It's the excessivity of the activity that results in our lack of virtue. In fact, if you were to ignore your survival instincts, you could easily fall victim to the sin of sloth. Some great examples of gluttony that extend beyond just eating and surviving include the excessive use of pornography, the hoarding of wealth, and even spending too much time indulging in activities such as partying, the abuse of drugs, listening to music, or watching movies. Virtue is a labor. It's all about staying within moderation with any activity you participate in. Americans are the pinnacle of gluttony. We've embedded gluttony into our very cultural identity. We no longer accept a life of normality, of comfortable survival. We've ingrained gluttonous behavior into our desires for luxuries, money, leisure, and even the poster child of gluttony, food. We're not satisfied with having what we need. We always need more. We need to continue to grind our gears until there's nothing left, all in the name of having more. Gluttony seems to have lost its sting after a time when being fat was a status symbol. However, like the strange cultural status symbol, the average American holds their excess, and whatever he indulges in, as a new symbol of status. To me, Aristotle is a great candidate for the origins of the 7 deadly sins. He had listed out 12 virtues with 2 accompanying vices for each virtue. With every virtue came an excess and a deficiency vice. There's no direct comparable vice for gluttony on Aristotle's list, but I think prodigality and vulgarity could fit the description best. These words aren't used in normal day-to-day life, so let me break them down a bit. Prodigality is the excessive vice to liberality. Liberality is about spending when you have wealth to maintain a level of happiness and not being excessive in modesty for one's success. Prodigality is when one goes beyond their means in spending. They begin spending as if it was an addiction. Dopamine is produced when buying new and exciting things, and this can become an addictive habit for many in the modern era, especially in regions like America, where consumerism is seen as a way of life. Suburban moms will rack up debt into the thousands on excessive purchases on accessories, clothes, or even spending on their loved ones out of the addiction to this dopamine hit. That's not to say that one's shopping or general spending of one's wealth is wrong. After all, the virtue of liberality is to find moderation. But there's an obvious sign of this form of gluttony. Your financial stability would be rather shaky if you fall to prodigality, since you would be spending beyond your means on any gluttonous activity. Vulgarity is the excessivity of celebration. Celebration is virtuous in Aristotle's eyes, as it would be a rather dull life to not celebrate special occasions, accomplishments, and stuff like that. However, one could become gluttonous in their partying habits. For example, it's rather inappropriate to live your life partying every day and night, or to have celebrations on culturally inappropriate occasions, such as throwing a party the day your father dies. Worse yet, there never was a party, and you're the idiot that just poured a bottle of Tito's vodka down your deceased father's throat. Party foul, bro. One might argue that all of Aristotle's excessive vices are a form of gluttony, but I think prodigality and vulgarity have a particularly self-indulgent nature that make them perfect candidates to be gluttony's inspirations in later writings, such as the 8 Evil Thoughts. Evagrius actually puts gluttony as his first evil thought, as it is seen as a sin of overcoming material pleasure, putting alongside sins such as lust and greed as the 3 most difficult sins to contest in Evagrius' mind. Evagrius also goes on to basically seal my theory of gluttony being a gateway sin with his writings in Discrimination 1. Evagrius declares for it to be impossible to fall into the spirit of adultery unless one has succumbed to gluttony. And my boy Evagrius knows a thing or two about the sin of lust. Evagrius was once an archdeacon in Constantinople. He claims his vanity led him into a sexual relationship with a married woman. He was never caught, but nonetheless, Evagrius would flee the city after having a dream where he saw the city guard coming to arrest him for the crime of adultery. He would eventually find himself at a monastery on the outskirts of Jerusalem. There, he met a desert mother, or essentially a female ascetic monk named Melania the Elder. During his time at the monastery, Palladius, the writer of Evagrius' biography, claims that due to Evagrius' indulgence with pride, he was stricken ill with a fever. So, in exchange for his health, Melania offered Evagrius to take up the habit and become a monk. After accepting, he recovered from his illness and took up the life of a Christian ascetic monk. He would later meet his friend and author of his biography, Palladius, where they would both spend 9 years in the desert, and Evagrius would write Anti-Hereticos, or in English, Counter-Arguments. In Counter-Arguments, he would categorize temptations into 8 evil thoughts. Evagrius had some pretty interesting journeys, and most of his experiences would go to shape his writings. So if this guy says gluttony is a gateway sin, it's pretty hard to argue otherwise. By overindulging in the satisfaction of our senses, we become easy prey to the other deadly sins. If we indulge in our sexual needs and desires, we could easily fall prey to the sin of lust. When we overindulge in feeding our ego, we become prideful. Overindulge in our material possessions leads us to becoming consumed by greed. We can also fall to sloth if we become overindulged to the point that we're no longer wanting to be able to conduct other tasks in our lives. And when others have what we crave, we become envious. Gluttony is truly a gateway sin. One could even argue that gluttony is the original sin of humanity, with Eve becoming gluttonous, and not only literally with the consumption of one forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden, but also, metaphorically, with her overindulgence into human curiosity. Humanity has an instinctual impulse to consume more than needed because of the scarcity of food in the early years of our species. An abundance of food would come much later in agricultural societies for humans. The more one ate, the more likely one was to survive and thrive. More likely to survive and thrive, the human population would increase rapidly, but that didn't mean we were able to trust unfamiliar humans. More humans meant more opportunity to commit sin. The ability to become overindulged in more than eating was growing proportionate to the size of urban spaces. More humans meant more opportunities to overindulge in the other sins as well. For example, you may fall for lust with the massive pool of sexual partners a city might offer you, or to wrath in a fit of road rage. The growth of man as a species has increased the difficulty to live virtuously, gluttony possibly the most. It's hard to consume anything in moderation when it's been designed to make you want more and more of it. The growth of technology has made it really easy for others to tap into your instinct to sin and use it for their own financial, political, or personal gain. Gluttony thrives on a society built on excessivity. So, the 7 deadly sins aren't something to condemn somebody over. Acting upon some of the less tasteful instincts is simply a breach of our unnatural creation of abstract concepts such as ethics and morals. These systems are in place for the benefit of society, however, which is why it's best to attempt to live a virtuous life, but not to get too down on yourself when you have a lack of willpower at times. We're human, imperfect beings, and sometimes, you know what? It's okay to eat a whole pizza by yourself every once in a while. Eat to live, not live to eat, is a quote by Socrates that I think sums up gluttony well. It's an easy indicator that you're becoming gluttonous when your life revolves around an individual indulgence to your senses. I don't subscribe to Christian ideals and ethics, but I think gluttony, much like the other 7 sins, give us a lot of insight into the human experience. It's not always easy to do the right thing, but it's the effort to be virtuous that counts in my opinion. Now, the other sins await, so please subscribe to be notified when the subsequent episodes release. Y'all have a good one now.